All right, guys, Josh here with Wired Wattsmart. Today, I wanted to get out a new episode on some electrical knowledge. So today, I'm going to be covering hot tubs, more along the electrical side of hot tubs and what you should be thinking about on the electrical side of things before you decide to buy a hot tub. All right, let's jump into it. The first thing that you need to consider is your panel in your house, right? So if you have a small 100 amp service, more than likely you're going to need to bump up to a 200 amp service in order to install your hot tub. That's something that's easily assessed. We have a look at it. We determine the size. We determine the loads in your house. We determine if you have enough ampacity in that panel in order to add the load of a hot tub. So that's kind of the first thing to consider, right? Like I have seen here recently, actually more than once, where, we've showed up to hook up a hot tub for somebody and they just flat out didn't have room in the panel, or they didn't have the ampacity in the panel to add the load safely. So that's definitely something that we want to think about before you go buy your hot tub, right? That's one of those things that can kind of save you a lot of heartache on the front end. It is kind of a devastating thing, man, when your hot tub's sitting there and we show up to wire it and it's like, hey, like we have this issue. So that's kind of the most important thing to think about from the electrical standpoint before you make the purchase. So the next things I'm going to touch on are just like what we look for in the install and some of the code requirements and some of the safety requirements that come along with installing a hot tub. So some of those key points. So I'm just going to kind of run through the list. So your hot tub typically takes a dedicated 50 or 60 amp circuit. That circuit needs to be GFCI protected. A GFCI, that stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. That is an electrical device that is put in place to protect personnel and property. The nuts and bolts of that thing is it trips at 0.005 milliamps. It's a very small thing that it detects an imbalance in the circuit, and so it's a safety device to protect your family, your kids, when they're inside of the hot tub. That device is installed in the breaker, so it's a GFCI breaker that needs to feed the hot tub. That is typically accomplished in hot tub disconnect. We have seen instances where some people will put that GFCI device in the breaker itself, and that's an acceptable installation. Just the circuit does need to be GFCI protected. Some other things to talk about with the hot tub disconnect. So general rule is it has to be more than 5 feet away from the inside edge of the hot tub, but it also has to be within sight of the hot tub. So it can be 25 feet away from the hot tub as long as you can see it, right? And that's kind of a safety thing. If there's ever any issue with somebody getting shocked in the hot tub, you need to know where to turn it off, but it has to be 5 feet away so you can't reach from the hot tub and grab it. So those are kind of some key things to think about with the disconnect and the placement of the disconnect. Um, some of the other things that we talk about that is often overlooked, especially when homeowners are trying to wire their own hot tubs, is the grounding and bonding of metal parts around the hot tub. So, and the technical term for this is equipotential bonding. What that means is so, like, to simplify this down so the average homeowner understands it, is anything metal within 5 feet of that hot tub has to be bonded at the same potential as the hot tub. So we're talking about metal fences, metal handrails, gutters. I've actually seen where we've had to bond aluminum gutters that are right next to a hot tub. One time I had to bond a metal window frame that was within 5 feet of the hot tub. Here most recently, we had to bond a metal roof on a is like an awning kind of situation that was right next to the hot tub. We had to bond that metal roof. So, I mean, to simplify it down, anything metal within that 5 feet of the hot tub has to be bonded. The equal potential bonding ring is created from the little ground bar that is inside the hot tub control panel. So we go from there. From that point, we run a number 8 wire out. We bond these metal pieces, and essentially we're bringing all of those metal parts and pieces to the same potential as the hot tub. That is, I mean, in a nutshell, that's equal potential bonding. I'm sure there's some electrician or home inspector out there that's listening to this that could probably pick that statement apart and simplify it more. But for talking to the average homeowner and the average person, that's what it means. The next thing we want to talk about, so any receptacles within 10 feet of that hot tub have to be GFCI protected. Kind of the same thing goes for a lighting circuit. So like let's say you have a light that's right above the hot tub. Let's say you have a nice deck, that has a cover on it, has a ceiling fan or a light that's, within 10 feet above the hot tub. That has to be on a GFCI circuit. That is often overlooked. We've seen that correction a couple of times where our electricians overlook it, but that definitely is a code requirement. One of the other things that we talk about is the installation methods for the hot tub, right? That is typically in copper conductors. Actually, all the time it's in copper conductors. Most of these hot tubs will say right in the control panel where all the requirements are, it will say a lot of times it will say 6 gauge copper minimum. That is often overlooked as well by electricians. I mean, if you're talking code, if it's a 50 amp circuit, you can actually put that on 8 gauge wire. But if you read the manufacturer's instructions inside of that, a lot of the times it will say 6 gauge copper only. I've seen that a number of times. I've actually had that correction written on myself a number of years ago. The inspector was kind enough to kind of school me up on that. So I got to wire that one twice, but I learned something, right? So I still chalk it up as a win. A lot of the hot tubs we've been wiring recently, they're split circuit hot tubs. And so what that means is it's a 50 amp feed that comes into the disconnect. And then from there, it jumps down to a 20 amp circuit and a separate 30 amp circuit. We have seen that a number of times. Both of those circuits are still GFCI protected. The big thing here, you keep hearing me say GFCI protection, right? Like that's kind of the most important thing with this. Those circuits have to be GFCI protected. You're in this thing. If it's not safe, one of my instructors at Perry Tech years ago used to say, you have the world's largest fry daddy sitting there with your kids in it. And so that's why it has to be on a GFCI protected circuit. That is one thing that I will not waver from on these installs. I have people and customers say all the time, well, can't you just take it off of the GFCI circuit? It's sensitive, it trips sometimes. And it's like, I can't do that, and I've had to have that conversation with not only pool contractors, but with homeowners, general contractors. And sometimes it's a pain in the ass, man. Like we've had issues where there's something internal to the hot tub that is going wrong, like a pool heater is starting to leak voltage and it's tripping the GFCI breaker. Well, the GFCI breaker is doing its job, right? It's tripping for a reason. And so in short, like it has to be GFCI protected. One of the other common things that I'm asked and I've seen a number of times is, people will feed these hot tubs with just big ass extension cords. You can't do that. That's a code violation as well. If you have that hot tub sitting out like on a concrete pad in your yard, you have to feed that with an underground feed, 18 inches deep. Typically it's a 1 inch conduit. You run the circuit out there underground in PVC. I mean, that's the way that it should be done. It shouldn't be ran in a cord that somebody can trip over, or it's going to get cut with a lawnmower, or it's going to get damaged. I mean, there's a number of reasons why you don't run it off of a cord. Mainly it's a code violation, and secondly it's half-ass, right? Like just don't do that. Don't let your handyman wire your hot tub. It's such a big thing, man. It's such a safety issue to have somebody unqualified to come out and wire your hot tub. I had an instance just this year where a gal called me and she's like, "Hey, we're having issues with the hot tub tripping, can you come out and have a look?" So absolutely, I went out there myself. I took the call myself, went out there, and I've never seen something so bad that this handyman wired this hot tub in for these people, and then he charged them accordingly, right? But the circuit came into the back of the disconnect. It had no grommets. There was actually multiple holes drilled in the back of it, and the wires were just coming through. No protection on the wires at all. There was a conduit that went out under the deck to feed this stuff. You didn't have the right size conductors in it. I mean, just the whole thing, right, was botched. And I asked the gal, I said, "Well, who did this? Did an electrical contractor do this?" And she's like, "Well, it's the guy who built the deck for us." And I will say the deck looked pretty decent. Like I'll give the guy that. Like the deck looked decent, but the wiring was definitely piss poor, and it was definitely handyman wiring, general contractor wiring, definitely done by somebody, who didn't know what the hell they were doing. And the issue why it was tripping is the wires were shorted out. They had nicks in them. They had scratches in the wires where like you could see bare copper. And so, I mean, we started from scratch. We rewired the whole thing for the lady. We had it inspected. And now, she's good to go, another happy customer, but more importantly, a safe customer now, right? The lady had grandkids that were always at her house, and like just such a rudimentary thing for, a contractor to do to somebody, to offer services for, something that they're not licensed to offer. And the lady got a very subpar deal, and she paid for it twice, right? Like she paid this guy to do it, and then she paid me to come out and take care of it the right way. And so that's something to be leery of, man. Like it's, if you have a contractor who is saying, hey, I can take care of all this. I can build the deck. I can wire the hot tub. I can do all this from A to Z. Like that's great, but make sure that they are hiring a certified electrical contractor to take care of the wiring portion. That's the difference there, right? Like L&I is a big thing in Washington State, and you can hire your contractor to do that, but make sure he is subbing out the wiring portion to somebody who is licensed, bonded, insured, has the proper qualifications, has a good reputation, like somebody who's going to come out and do it right. Pools and hot tubs is one of the things that the state is very strict on. They don't waver from the rules. I don't waver from the rules. It's such a safety thing that you want to make sure that it's done right and it's done proper. So I I kind of covered the basics on this. I didn't want this to be a real long episode. I just wanted to kind of get some basic information out there on some of the things that you want to look into before you purchase. But after you make that purchase, like these are some of the other things that you can kind of assess on your own. That way you kind of have an idea of what needs to happen. And like I said in the first part of the show, like we give free estimates for hot tubs, free assessments, and obviously it's a free estimate to have us come out and get you a quote for wiring up that new hot tub, to make sure it's right, make sure it's safe, to make sure it's done under manufacturer specifications. That way your warranty is valid. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on that one, guys. Keep us in mind for those things, and before you buy that hot tub, have a quick listen to this, guys. This is Josh with Wired Wattsmart.